Good evening, everyone, and a warm Winnipeg welcome to all of you. I'm Judith Newman, graduate of the University of Winnipeg, class of 71, and current president of the University of Winnipeg Alumni Association. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our second speaker event of 2023, and I thank you for taking the time to be with us. It's always a privilege to provide an opportunity to highlight our accomplished University of Winnipeg alumni and find out about their personal story, what influence the University of Winnipeg may have had on them, what inspired them and has led to their success, and what wisdom they can impart to present day students and recent grads. Today, we have the pleasure of chatting with two very distinguished University of Winnipeg graduates. Julie Friesen is Deputy Commissioner of Administration at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, the largest local public health department in the United States. In that role, she oversees the human and capital resources of the organization, including 7,000 staff and 25 sites. She graduated from the University of Winnipeg in 1984 with a BA in Economics and Political Science. She joins us today from New York. Tara Shuchuk is Global Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer at Medtronics, a multinational medical device company in Minneapolis. She has more than 30 years' experience in health law, policy, and compliance, and has taught at several law and medical schools and published in the area of health law. She graduated from the University of Winnipeg in 1990 with a BA in History and Sociology, and she's joining us today from Minneapolis. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn things over to Alumni Council member Dr. Fred Appel, who is joining us from Princeton, New Jersey, and he will introduce our speakers and be our moderator for the remainder of this event. Thank you, Fred.
Well, thank you, Judith. And I want to thank you for your leadership at the head of the University of Winnipeg Alumni Council and for your work with the Alumni Association. I want to just begin by thanking the other members of the U of W Alumni Council for their support. I want to thank our colleague Evan from the U of W Media Services Department for helping us to organize this webinar, and folks in the U of W alumni office for helping us spread the word about this evening's event. I am also an alum, of course, of the University of Winnipeg, and I graduated in between our two guests this evening. I graduated in 1985 with a BA honors, just a year after Julie, who graduated with a BA in Economics and Political Science in 1984. And Tara followed us soon thereafter with a BA in History and Sociology in 1990. So thank you both, Julie and Tara, for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join me for this chat this evening. I was just, I think as we were talking before we went on live with this webinar, I'd like to structure our time together as a conversation. And you both have such very interesting backgrounds, so accomplished. I have so many questions to ask you about your backgrounds and your professional duties. And I want to, segue into a discussion about your respective career paths and move towards some advice you might be able to impart to current students and recent alums at the University of Winnipeg, people interested in the healthcare industry, careers in the healthcare industry, careers in public health, careers in medical related vocations. But first, let me begin by asking you both. So Julie, you were born and raised on a farm west of Winnipeg. Is that what community were you closest to growing up?
So I was born in a hospital in Winnipeg and grew up on a farm about 30 minutes west of the city. So You know, if for people who may know St. Francis Xavier and the White Horse on the highway, about 4 miles west of that, not quite all the way to Ely. In between that and Ely is was the family farm that I grew up on.
Right. And you were the first member of your family to attend university. Was that always a foregone conclusion for you?
Yeah, yes, definitely. Our parents always said, you know, this is just something, you know, that you're going to do
Okay.
when you grow up. So I had a lot of great positive reinforcement about that.
Right. So there were no older siblings who were went to the university before.
No,
Okay.
I have an older brother, but he, you know, he was farming, so chose
Yes.
not to do
Yes.
that. And then, yeah, so I came next.
I'm right. And Tara, I mean, I myself was raised in the suburbs, in the city, in River Heights. In fact, it was. What about you? Were you raised a Winnipegger? Where are you from?
Yeah, thanks, Fred. And so I was born in in Winnipeg in St. James,
St.
and
James.
largely grew up in Brooklands. That is, I think Brooklands is considered part of St. James.
Mm.
Spent a little bit of time. My dad took a job in the oil sands up in Fort McMurray when I was in third grade. So I spent third through fifth grade in Fort McMurray, and then
Wow.
briefly in Calgary. But Calgary didn't turn out so well, so we ended up back in Winnipeg. So I had a brief stint out west, but primarily grew up in Brooklands. Actually, the same house that I was in from about, I don't know, I was 2 years old to when I left to go away to law school.
Wow, you were able to move back to the same house in St. James in which you had lived previously?
Yep, our house in Brooklands, my grandmother had moved in while we were away in Alberta, and then we came back.
Okay, fun fact, my late father operated a drugstore in St. James for many years, and I'm sort of wondering if you ever dropped in to Parkview Drugs on Portage Avenue. Ring a bell at all?
Yes, definitely.
No way.
Yes.
No way. How do you know Parkview Drugs,
I
Julie?
just remember the sign. I mean, we did all our shopping in St. James, and my grandfather lived in St. James.
Okay.
My grandparents, and then my grandfather, after my grandmother passed away, lived there. And actually, for the last portion of my degree at U of W, I lived with him in his house on Thompson Drive in St. James. So, you know, Portage Avenue, that was my,
Everybody goes down Portage Avenue.
All right, so there's clearly one point of convergence, one personal point of convergence between the two of you is St. James. That's quite clear. Another one, by the by, is your love of hiking, because in your respective bios, I noticed that this is an important and beloved pastime for both of you, right? Tara with her family and friends, and Julie in upstate New York with her friends and family. Right. Now, so let me ask you, so, my daughters, who are now out of college, they were born in Canada, but raised in the US. They were told and taught that they had a plethora of choices when they were in high school, thinking about all manner of colleges to research and to apply to. I mean, when I was growing up in River Heights, the choices were two. I mean, conceivably, they could have been a lot more than two, but I just never thought that I had any choice other than the U of W or the U of Manitoba. Was it the same for the two of you?
I don't know, Julie, do you want to go? I can go first.
Either, please.
Yeah. So I'd say it was an interesting evolution. So similar to Julie, and it was an interesting fact as we were briefing for this call that, I was also the first in my family to go to university.
Right.
And so it wasn't like a known, well understood, pathway. And so how do you, and I was trying to reach back even like the 35, 40 years ago, like how did I even think about going to university since it wasn't something that was, a historical known thing in my family. And I'd say it was largely because my peers came from, families that went to university. And so, and sort of the interesting fact there is my high school in Brooklands had closed just before I hit high school age. And so we were allowed to be bused. And their choices were one of three high schools. One was, and this actually leads to your question, Fred, one of three high schools. One was Westwood, or no, one was Sturgeon Creek, the other was St. James Collegiate, and then the third was Silver Heights. And those would be the choices that anybody from my neighborhood had since our high school was closing. One night in ninth grade, I attended an information session, which was about this new program called International Baccalaureate. And so Silver Heights was starting an IB program, which was pretty new at the time and maybe one of the first in the city. And so I got fired up about that and excited. And so I chose to go to Silver Heights. From that, actually, the U of W offered a scholarship to graduates with an IB degree, meaning you had done the various coursework requirements for the IB diploma. And so it then became a no-brainer, so to speak. Like I didn't even look at the University of Manitoba, and frankly, it was also far away for me and not easy to get to. And so between the scholarship and the fact that I could bike, to the U of W, I could work at the hospital that I was working at and, do both school and work. It was just like a easy decision.
Was it Seven Oaks Hospital? Is that where you were working?
No, it was actually Children's Hospital, right at the Children's right down on William Avenue.
What about you, Julie? Was the choice clear for you as you were, about to exit high school?
Yeah, I think so, mostly because I remember my mother encouraging me to think about University of Winnipeg. And there, like I mentioned, it was even at the beginning of my university career, actually, that I lived at my grandfather's house in St. James. It was, I graduated from John Taylor Collegiate because I was really wanting to get out of the country school I was at didn't offer all the university entrance courses that I really wanted.
Yes.
So I was able to go to John Taylor Collegiate, live in my grandfather's house. I did that and spent the last couple of years of high school there. So as I was thinking about university, my mom was really talking about U of W. She liked that it was United College and had a connection to the United Church. We were not really church-going people, but that was her thinking. And I liked it because for a couple of reasons. One, it was easy to get to from St. James on the bus.
Right.
Closer than U of M and much smaller in scale. I felt, and I liked that it was downtown. And I just liked figured I'd get more personal attention in the classes. And there was a theater school there. I was not studying theater, but I just felt like it was kind of a more artsy, kind of more, more place for me. More of a match.
It's so accessible. Like, I think thinking back on it, I think I would have felt a little lost at the University of Manitoba. I'm sure I would have figured it out, but it's so vast and enormous. And yet, U of W is just more intimate and manageable.
Definitely a factor for me too.
And Julie, you say you were living in your grandfather's house in St. James. Was this like independent living, or did you have like surrogate parents, in the house as well?
I was his roommate.
Okay, so, all right.
It was a place for me to live rent-free while I was going to school. So I was sort of taking care of helping, he was very independent himself at that point. Yes. I was just helping out around the house and the yard and making dinner and helping him out a little bit. And, that's how we lived.
Now, the two of you both came to major in, humanities and social science disciplines. Tara, history and sociology, Julie, political science and economics. And I wonder how you gravitated to those particular majors. Did you both experiment a bit and take a lot of science classes? Were any of your undergraduate classes initially, for instance, sort of science related or applied science related at all?
You go, Julie.
Okay. I did not. I went in knowing I wanted to major in political science. I was very interested in that, field, that discipline. I had volunteered a bit already on some political campaigns, very interested in that. And
Mm,
I was also interested in learning about economics. And so when you do a double major, there's not a lot of room for a lot of electives.
yes.
So I just took the basic required science course, which I believe was anatomy, biology. Yeah, that's what I did.
I took biology. I don't think I took chemistry. I took biology, but I was definitely more of a humanities bent person coming in. And what I had worked at the Children's Hospital, as I mentioned, and from there I was pretty interested in social work, actually. And so my major originally was sociology. I'd actually thought originally anthropology, and then I quickly realized I couldn't get a job probably in anthropology unless I went all the way to a PhD or something. So just trying to be practical. And what I knew, having worked at the hospital, was social work. And so I did the sociology track. And then, I think, I can't remember if it was my first year or my second year, I took a history class with Robert Young, and just turned me on to history. And I loved history in high school too, but I quickly dove in and really explored the course catalog there. And ultimately, it became my double major. That was kind of the way that unfolded. And yeah.
We were talking a bit about, professors we remember from our respective times at the U of W. You just mentioned Robert Young. I gather he was someone who kind of lit a fire under you and got you really excited about history and taking more. Were there any other professors, Tara and Julie, professors that really kind of, you know, woke you up or motivated you in particular, got you really, keen on learning?
I'll just mention the other one that definitely stands out for me is Naomi Levine, and Naomi was a adjunct, so she wasn't a full-time professor there, and she was a practicing lawyer. And so I took a class from her. I think it may have been criminology as part of my sociology major. And she introduced me to the idea that you could be a lawyer. And so I never thought about that as an option before taking that class from her. And so, kind of changed my life.
Yeah, please go ahead,
love,
Julia.
yeah, no, I took her class too, or at least some, I don't know, I don't think it was criminology, but she taught a legal, intro to legal something.
That was probably it. That's
thing.
probably, you have a better memory. I'm sure that was.
No. Anyway, point is, I loved her. I thought she was great. And I thought actually, as I was graduating from U of W, that eventually I'd work for a while and I'd go back to school and it would be law school. I found her very inspiring. I also really enjoyed David Walker, who was another adjunct. I really liked his classes in political science because he was very, he was working in the field. It was very, practice oriented, and he gave us, as students, a lot of great career advice. He connected me to my first job as I graduated. And then Jim Silver, we've already talked about. And another professor who sadly I think has passed on, but Emmett Mulvaney, he's this really sweet, quiet professor who taught labor economics, which I did not know was a thing until I took his courses. And it just made economics sort of come alive for me and meaningful, not just about, graphs and charts and theories, but really maybe discover labor economics.
As the two of you progressed in your undergraduate, time at the U of W, and as you began thinking about what comes next, I wonder if any of your professors were a source of practical advice and support about what to do next, or if you really just figured it out on your own, in discussion with your friends and family. Tara, do you want to go first?
Sure. In addition to what I described with Naomi, just understanding what that world was and could be, being a lawyer, I would say, that was obviously really impactful, like I said. With Bob Young, you know, what was impactful for me with him was a few things. One, he really taught me how to think and how to be analytical and how to be a really strong writer. He also was great at feedback, provided the most detail. You'd write an essay for him and he would practically write an essay back of all the feedback that he would provide. And, you know, it was just such a great learning atmosphere to have somebody who spent that much time, you know, in addition to his teaching, which I thought was really great. It was how he approached, you know, helping you learn. And in fact, when I was applying to law school, you know, you need recommendations. And he was one of the people that I sought a recommendation from. And maybe Naomi was too. I can't remember who I got the other recommendation from. But what I remember about my recommendation with him was he sat me down and he was like, you know, you really should think about grad school in history, because I think you'd be a great history professor. And, you know, do you really want to do this law school thing? And you know, I'm happy to write you a recommendation, which of course he did. And I got in, so it helped. But he was thinking I should think about history. And it was just, you know, I did think about it. I think maybe coming from my background a little bit, I felt like I needed a pathway to a career that would pay. And so I did focus on law school, but it was just so touching to have somebody care about my career, and especially, you know, being first generation. And it's not like my parents didn't care, but they didn't know what the options were. And the fact that he took the time to have me think about other options was just really incredible.
And you know how touching and how flattering that he would see in you that potential and would verbalize it, and you know suggest to you, you know, higher education. You know, you the first person in your family who's gone to, you know, post-secondary education. What about you, Julie?
Well, I think I'd have to say David Walker in my case was the professor that really, and maybe that's because I saw him as like my sort of my mentor in a way, and mentor to the work world and the world that I, you know, wanted to work in at that time, which was a more sort of political environment, I guess. So he was definitely connected. He had a great network and introduced me to all kinds of people. And, you know, from that, I got, like I said, my first job upon graduation, working for Lloyd Axworthy, who at that time was Canada's Minister of Transportation. So that was very exciting. I worked as a special assistant in the Winnipeg office. I didn't move to Ottawa. Yeah, so I guess and at that point I thought, you know, I'd go back to school, but at some point in the future. So I felt I needed to graduate and get a job, I'd make money, you know, like I think you know.
So let me ask you both a question about timing. So you know, some young people take a gap year or are tempted to take a gap year after graduating, you know, with their BA or BSc. It sounds to me like the two of you moved right along. Tara getting her moving into her law school program at McGill, and you, Julie, working in Lloyd Axworthy's office, right, when he was transport minister, right? I know he was also Minister of External Affairs at one point, but that was a later portfolio, right?
Yeah, that was not when I was working for him.
Right. And he was Trudeau Senior still Prime Minister at the time, or was this Turner, or?
You know, it was just switching over from Trudeau to we didn't know who. I was there during that time, if it was going to be Chrétien or Turner. And it ended up being Turner.
It sounds like both of you were very keen to move along. I'm curious, Julie, how the opportunity to move into this first position of public service arose. Was it because of involvement, volunteer work for the Liberal Party, or was it some other, you know, circumstance altogether?
No, I think it was my volunteer work. You know, I was part of the Young Liberals. I volunteered on campaigns. I, you know, worked for the party for a bit as a youth coordinator. So definitely, I think that gave me the connections there. Yeah, to get into that field.
Wow. And Tara, let me ask you, as you were thinking about law school, was it quite clear the direction where you wanted to go? Were you looking at law schools across Canada? Was McGill the one that you really targeted? And if so, why McGill?
Well, I'd thought about primarily University of Manitoba. That was my main plan, was to go there. But I sort of like, well, what the heck? I'll apply to a few other places as well. So I did apply to a few other places, including McGill, all in Canada. And then, I was admitted, and I kind of surprised that it happened. And so then it became like, oh, this is an option. I need to think about this. And frankly, it was a tough choice because my parents really wanted me to stay in Winnipeg. They,
Sure,
felt like, why leave? You can do it here. You can stay at home, and it's all simple and easy. But as the opportunity presented itself, I decided to take that plunge. And so that's why I headed out there. I did head out though, kind of knowing that I wanted to do something in the healthcare space. So
Yes.
again, kind of hearkening back to my children's hospital days, which, by the way, also helped me afford to go away to law school. And again, I bring it back to Winnipeg, to the University of Winnipeg, because that urban environment, where I was able to toggle between the university and my job in a much easier way, just to me, it kind of led to this next opportunity, because I was able to save. I was living at home still. I was able to save money. And from the money that I was able to save, I was able to use that to go away to law school and pay for law school. So, it all kind of relates
Right.
in my mind. And again, my hospital experience showed me that I knew I never was going to be a doctor, because I couldn't deal with like blood and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do something in that space. And so I kind of went with the idea that I would do something in sort of the health law world.
So remind me again, Tara, what your job was at the hospital, the part-time job that you had while you were going to U of W?
Well, I had two jobs, meaning two consecutive. One, my first job there was in the child life department. So I was supporting kind of the child care, the daycare for the kids in the hospital. That's what child life is. And then from there, I mostly then worked in the radiology department. I was a clerk in the radiology department.
Wow. Okay. All right. So a very early and deep exposure to healthcare environments and medical environments. I want to ask both of you, Julie and Tara, about leaving Winnipeg. Now, in the case of Tara, it was, I guess, difficult, but it happened right away after graduation. Even though the pull of the city and a family was obviously there. And for Julie, I gather that, the move took a decade, right? I mean, you graduated in 1984, and, your biography says that you fulfilled the dream to move to New York City in 1994. Were there any way stations along the line between 84 and 94, or was it Winnipeg and working in public service in Winnipeg up until 94?
It was the latter, with a little bit of a break after I graduated, and there was an election while I was working for Lloyd Axworthy, and the Liberal Party lost.
Big time.
Yes. So I was without a job. I was unemployed. And I'd been saving my money anyway. I took a little time off, and I traveled through Europe and Middle East a little bit for several months, and I worked on a kibbutz. And
were you traveling on your own?
Yes, I went on my own. I didn't know anyone, went on my own, met people along the way, traveled a bit with people here and there as I met them. I came back and I needed a job. So I actually found a job through, I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was basically a job center that I think the federal government ran. It was in downtown Winnipeg, and I went there. I was like talking to everybody I knew, but I found a job with the Manitoba government as a policy analyst, working at the Manitoba Women's Directorate, which was great. And honestly, I felt like it was a better fit for me after having worked in a very partisan, political environment. I really liked working in more of a public service job as a civil servant. So that was what I did for a number of years. And I kept getting interesting assignments. I then ended up in the Manitoba Child Daycare office and promotions there. And, I had a nice, very nice life. I served on some nonprofit boards. One of them was, again, thinking law school. I thought, let me just see what it's actually. I want to talk to some lawyers about what life is really like, because people were saying to me, I don't know if you would like law school. And I said, well, why? Anyway, I got myself on the board of the Community Legal Education Association, I think. I was one of the few non-lawyers on the board. Anyway, I ended up meeting a lot of people and learning more about a lawyer's life, and thought, maybe not for me. I had no idea public policy school at the graduate level existed. I had never heard of it. Somehow found out about that and decided that's what I would do instead. So I then also really wanted to live in a bigger city and try that out. And I thought, well, this would be a way to do that. I could go to school in a really big city, and which is what I was looking for. So I thought I could maybe do that in another country, because I could get a visa with my, through my schooling. So I ended up with another friend from University of Winnipeg who was working at the Uniter at the time, going to visit New York City. I was still a student, and that had stayed with me. This school that I'd learned about in New York City many years before.
This was in the early 1990s, yes?
Yes, I visited New York first in 1983, this friend, and I fell in love with New York City. But I thought, how can I live here someday? I don't know how I can make that happen. I don't know anybody here. I don't have any citizenship. How's that going to work? So, but I kept that thought. And then when it came time to go to grad school, I thought, I really have to get on this. I'm going to look at schools in New York City. Maybe I could do that. And I looked at grad schools in the city, and they were super expensive, of course, never mind the cost of living here. But I ended up getting a full scholarship to the New School for Social Research. So it was a full ride, all paid for. And I took the leap, and I came here for that. And obviously I had a student visa attached, which then led to connections here through alumni networks and so on. So I was offered a job before I graduated with a visa attached with the city of New York.
Wow. So for those listening to the webinar who may not know about the New School for Social Research, it is a very distinguished post-secondary institution that has its origins in the 20th century. It's a relatively young institution, and it was started by political refugees, European intellectuals who were fleeing Nazi tyranny, who were very distinguished in their respective fields in the social sciences and humanities in particular, formed this remarkable institution, which has since branched out and has programs in the performing arts, and has a very robust continuing education program. And so it's interesting, Julie, you fell in love with New York, and you made the leap right from Winnipeg to Manhattan. There was no Toronto or Winnipeg in between.
Nope.
And it was a bit of a grittier city back then than it is today, and certainly a lot more affordable than it is today.
That's true. Yes. Both those things are true. And I just remember, but I saw a big change from 83 to 94. I mean, in 83, when I visited, the subways were covered with graffiti.
Yes.
There were people standing around burning barrels to warm their hands, in the parks in Manhattan. I mean, it was a little wild. But in 94, things were much, much less sort of gritty.
Yes.
But still a little rough around the edges, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So Julie's first sort of living experience in the States coincided with her graduate education, clearly. And but Tara, that was not the case for you. Could you tell the story? I mean, was it was there a period working professionally in Canada before your migration, for personal or professional reasons, or both, to the US?
So this is why my parents, I'm sure, didn't want me to go away to law school because they knew I would probably never come back. And as a parent now, I can see how that happens. I went to law school at McGill, and I met my spouse, my love of my life, and
Another
so-
law student, a fellow law
no,
student?
he was not a law school student. He was actually a med student there, and so an American. So we met there, and eventually decided that we were going to get married. And so I did have an articling position back in Winnipeg with the Crown, and I ended up abandoning that because we decided it just made more sense for the both of us to live in the US versus Canada. So I then moved to Chicago shortly after. Well, we got married and then we lived in Chicago.
Okay. So forgive me if I passed over this. So your now husband, your then boyfriend, fiance, is American, was American, is American.
He's
Yes.
American, yeah.
Oh, okay. So he was one of the, I guess, one of the few American students in the medical school at McGill.
Yep. So then we ended up. It made, like I say, made more sense to move here, and that's how I got my resident status, was through my American husband.
Okay, so your first exposure to U.S. immigration, bureaucracy and paperwork was through, it was sort of through marriage. And Julie, it was a student visa of some sort, like a J visa or one of those in that alphabet soup of U.S. immigration.
Forget
Very complicated. No matter which letter you have, I'm sure it's pretty complicated.
Yes.
Right. Right. So, and Tara, you've been in the Midwest ever since, or I guess through Medtronic, you have had an opportunity to live in many different places. Is that right?
So we lived in the Chicago area for about 18 years in different parts of Chicago, and then we moved to Memphis with Medtronic. So I started at Medtronic in 2011, and with that we moved to the Memphis area and lived there for about eight and a half years, and then most recently moved here to the Minneapolis area. The Medtronic company is based here in Minneapolis, and so this is the headquarters.
Right. Very good. So I want to I want to move towards a discussion about your respective jobs. I mean, you both have such interesting work. Clearly, both of you are working with people in your respective positions. I mean, Julie works in a very large department, the Department of Health and Hygiene, and in the Division of Administration, there are 400 staff people. The whole Department of Health and Mental Hygiene has 7,000 people. Clearly, Julie has a lot of direct reports. Tara, you're working in a very large multinational corporation. You clearly have people reporting to you. You're navigating a very complex bureaucracy. I wonder if the two of you could share where you picked up your business acumen. I mean, it wasn't, I guess, the undergraduate education. Was it the analytical skills, the people skills? Was it just learning by doing? I mean, Julie, working on political campaigns, I mean, this must have been a great schooling for you, I guess, initially in this area.
Yeah, for sure, because it's the people business, but it's communication, right? It's if you're hopefully you're listening to, listening to what people want and need,
Yes.
and trying to be responsive to that, and just having a finger on the pulse of what people are, really interested in at that time and what they need. So I think those skills you know, I definitely picked up a lot of those skills. Also, when I was at University of Winnipeg, I got involved with the University of Winnipeg Students Association. And I actually was, I had a paid part-time job for a while. I was the internal coordinator for
Mm,
WSA, which is really like the business side of the organization, you know? So we would have meetings, I would take minutes, I would, you know, follow up on some of the, you know, tasks that needed to be done,
yes.
to administer that entity. You know, we had a budget and we had responsibilities and things to do and account for. And so that I think gave me a great grounding at the U of W. Even though I wasn't studying that, I was doing that there. So that was super helpful. And I guess I've always had kind of an analytical mind. I like to just, you know, and I think studying economics maybe, you know, is an indicator of that. But I just, yeah, I feel like I'm interested in people. I'm interested in systems and big systems and trying to move things in systems to make things better for people, especially people who don't really have a lot of
Yes.
power or a strong voice.
Tara, what was your first experience of management and, you know, working with people, coordinating folks?
Well, I love Julie's answer. I think all those things really resonate. I don't know, I probably 20 years ago is when I started leading people, a little bit, maybe more like 24 years ago. Very small scale. I think for most people, it starts small, but it's easy to move from small to big. Like it might seem kind of intimidating, but at the end of the day, like even today, I've got like 5 direct reports. And I've got a lot of people that flow down from there, but it's still just 5 that I'm managing directly. And when I started off, I was managing like 2. So, you know, it becomes, I think, something that you just sort of grow into over time. And hopefully, if you get the opportunity to do it the first time, that's always the hardest thing for people. I think to get that first opportunity. And then when you get that first opportunity, I think it's all the things that Julie just described really well. And you know, interestingly, I was thinking as we were talking about this call and the professors that we shared, there is a through line, I think, with sociology, and I do think that some of the skills you learn in that subject matter are very helpful to, you know, the people management business, because it is all about people at the end of the day. And whether it's psychology, because they have, you know, there's some related classes between the psychology department and the sociology department, you know, just thinking about people and systems, Julie mentioned, it's like organizations, how they work. For me, with, you know, in a big company, and it's not probably the same in most companies, leading through change. Like, you know, I think now the pace of change is faster than ever. And so being change agile, and again, I think about some of the teachings in the sociology, psychology space. Like how do you help people navigate through change? To me, that's a big part of being a people leader.
You are poster children for liberal arts education, clearly, you know?
Big believer. Totally.
As am I like to see in my modest little way. I'm just going to hit the pause button now, the metaphoric pause button, just to address the folks in the virtual webinar room. If you have any questions at all that you'd like to pose to Tara or to Julie, please feel free to type them in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and I promise to read them out and to have Tara and Julie address them. But we're not quite there yet. I still have oodles of questions. We need to move into a discussion of health. You know, the medical related and health related industries that the two of you have found yourself in. I've tracked your careers through your, you know, graduate education, your professional education, and your migration to the U.S. But I still haven't found out how you have moved, how you both of you moved into a health-related area. I mean, Tara is now working for one of the world's largest medical device companies with branches all over the world, based in Minneapolis, and Julie is working for one of the great public health departments in the Western world that's responsible for the public health and well-being of New Yorkers. And it's a very big place. So you didn't begin where you are now, but how is it that the two of you respectively moved into health or medical related vocations? Whoever wants to start, please.
I'll start. So I, was always interested in public service, as we've talked about, and I ended up, when I graduated from the master's program here, I ended up working in public finance at the city's Office of Management and Budget, or OMB. I wanted to learn about public finance. I figured, that's where the influence and the power is. So that was a great starting point. And it gave me a bird's eye view of all the municipal agencies that we oversaw. And I learned that at that time that the health department here was one of the most dynamic, filled with really smart, very committed people. And it was on my radar. But I didn't end up there right away. I worked at a few other places first, a division of the mayor's office, and then a couple of other city agencies, worked my way up through those on the administrative and finance side. Then when a deputy commissioner job opened up at the health department, I went for that. I did not know anybody at the health department. At that time, I saw the job posted and applied and went through several very rigorous interviews and got the job. And I got that job not because I had public health experience, but I had a lot of experience, on the administrative side with city systems, finance, labor relations, all the people stuff, procurement, contracting. These are all kind of specialties in their own way, I guess.
Yes.
The health
Yes.
department really needed that. So that was my in for me. And I've stayed there now. I've been there 11 years plus. I haven't worked at any other place that long my whole life because I love it so much. It's just always different every day. We do so many different things. Unlike a typical government agency, you might do one or two things. We do at least a dozen different things. So, including responding to pandemics, and a lot of other things too. But, and just, we have CDC assignees working with us, a lot of really people who are publishing things. I'm learning a lot every day from my colleagues. So it's very stimulating, exciting. And I believe very strongly too, in grad school, I took a couple of public health courses. So I learned about the field, and it's really a natural fit for me.
Now, Julie, you mentioned that you saw a job in the Department of Health posted. So, and this is because you were already in the municipal government. You were working for the NYC Office of Management and Budget. So you were within the system, and once you were in the system, you were privy to information, job openings in other departments in the municipal system. Is that right?
Yes, but that job actually was posted to the world. I mean, anybody from the outside could also compete for that job. And so
I see.
At that level, at the senior executive levels, they're open to outsiders too, which is good, right? I mean, you want people to come in and lead organizations that have a variety of experiences. But I think I had a sort of an advantage because I had all these, skills that were needed for that job.
And thank you. And Tara, tell me about your path to a sort of a medical service related industry.
Well, I hope a lot of people are listening and thinking about, especially if you're early in your career, there's not usually a straight line path. It's a pretty meandering, people call it the jungle gym. And I'd say that's where my path went. I didn't, if you had told me 30 years ago I'd be in the job that I'm in today, or the type of field that I'm in today, I wouldn't have believed it to be true, in part because actually sort of the field I'm in today didn't exist 30 years ago. And so what I mean by that is, I currently lead an ethics and compliance program for Medtronic, and that didn't really exist. It didn't exist 30 years ago. It existed in the finance industry and places like that, but not necessarily in healthcare. And so how I got there was not straight line. I started in a standalone hospital. Well, I had a number of other jobs, policy related, partly also worked for the city of Chicago briefly. So I'm interesting, Julie, that we've got sort of that city government connection. And then, one day I ended up in this standalone hospital. I thought I'd be doing more sort of the legal risk management and medical ethics work. I really felt a huge desire to do work in the medical ethics space. And I was doing all that in the standalone hospital, but then the hospital was merged with a larger system. And at that time, I was asked to lead the compliance program for the larger system. And so I did that for 11 years in the Chicago system, and then eventually moved into the pharmaceutical space, also in the Chicago area, and then over to medical device. And so I kind of moved from medical ethics, which is more what I call bedside ethics, and I did some training in that space, to more corporate ethics. And, again, I knew that I always wanted to work in the healthcare space, and didn't know how what was going to happen, how it was going to actually all lead to this road today. But the road came and I took it, and couldn't be happier. I mean, it really blends a lot of my passions, passion for people, passion for patients, passion for, doing the right thing, and ensuring that, we're doing our work with integrity. That's kind of the core of the work that I help lead.
Yes.
So it's fun. It's all about culture at the end of the day too, which is also a fun place to be.
So for the benefit of everyone watching and listening in, and for my benefit too, so Tara, I must ask you what a typical day looks like, to give us a sense of the range of your responsibilities, practical and other, and then I'd like to hear the same thing from Julie as well.
Yeah. Well, the day is busy and long. I actually was just getting a phone call from a colleague, and in part that's because the time zones are like forever.
That was that buzz that I was hearing, right?
That was the buzz.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So, I mean, part of the challenge of a job in a global company is that you are always on.
Yep.
And, my work ranges quite a bit. I mean, actually this week is a super fun week because we just celebrated Ethics and Integrity Week. And so I had the opportunity to host a number of events that were broadcast, live to our employee base around, doing the right thing, raising your hand when you see something that's wrong, and bringing that forward. Really trying to encourage what we call a speak up culture, so that you see something, you say something kind of thing, all the way to dealing with investigations. I've also been struggling and dealing with a pretty high level investigation in another country. And, we're going to have to take some significant actions, and, that will include employee terminations and that sort of thing. So, there's the broad range running from the fun stuff and a lot of, emails and slide decks. And I'm sure all this is familiar to everybody who's living in any kind of business world today, Julie, like just lots of emails and slide decks, Zoom calls.
All right. I have one follow-up question for you, and then I want to hear from Julie. So you work in a sort of a medical device, a huge medical device company. There's a lot of science and a lot of applied science and medicine that you're exposed to, and that is part of the mission of the company. You yourself are not a trained scientist or a doctor. Clearly, you have assimilated over the years ample knowledge in this area. Has your legal background served you in this regard? Could you imagine someone in your current position without a law degree, or someone with a more scientific degree, perhaps someone with a medical degree in your position?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the role I'm in does not require a law degree. And in fact, a more common or an equally common background is actually a finance degree. So somebody who's maybe got an auditing background, CPA, sometimes somebody from a medical background, but it's probably more likely those, more of a financial background. But yeah, I get the privilege of working with doctors a lot every day, and also a lot of research scientists. We have a ton of PhDs in our company who develop the next generation of products and do clinical studies and all those sorts of things.
Terrific. Now, Julie, I want to find out about your day. And you say that every day is different. And so it might be a challenge to narrate a typical day, but could you take a stab at it?
Sure. Yes, I will talk about how things are now, not during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, which was
Sure.
not a typical day, obviously. So being in charge of labor relations and all the employee stuff at the organization, I can say that right now, and this is, I think, the case for all residents of New York City and maybe beyond, but people are feeling still like they're recovering from things, I think, and we're seeing behavioral issues with people at work, or maybe they're witnessing things on their commute to work and they're feeling sometimes unsettled and unsafe. So we've had to address this, like at a very senior level. We've got a pretty robust worksite wellness program, and we've beefed that up. That reports to me, in the last year. We've created a lot of training sessions. We have counseling that we're referring people to if needed, and of course, it's only if they want it. We've had the incidents happening at work, so sometimes they're kind of emergency incidents, and I'm called upon with my team to, respond.
I'm sorry, incidents within the Department of Health, do you mean?
Yeah, that's not happening a lot by any means, but we had one it's sticking out in my mind because it was pretty dramatic. It was an employee who was having some challenges, and the people on site were trying to help, and it wasn't working.
Okay.
So out of that now, I'm going to several meetings. That issue was resolved, but it was traumatic for people who witnessed it and so on. So now I'm going to a series of meetings, and I've been put in charge with coming up with a protocol and training and more resources for supervisors who don't know what to do when their employees are struggling. They really don't know what to do. They want to do the right thing, and they're not sure what that is. So believe it or not, the city doesn't really have anything in place as a city. So we're creating something. I went to, the city's personnel agency. They don't really have anything. I went to the city's mayor's office of labor relations. They don't really have much. So anyway, so we're doing that. So I'm spending a little bit of extra time sort of in that whole world right now. We have agency town halls that we do. And I spoke at one a couple of days ago about security and safety because I was asked to do that because people are asking about it.
Yes.
We're putting a whole bunch of extra security cameras in but we have 28 sites in a lot of locations. People want to see that we're addressing this issue too, and in a meaningful way. So that's kind of top of mind right now, actually.
Yes. Did you find that, you came to the position with training in public policy and with a lot of practical experience working in procurement, negotiating with people, managing people, but no medical background. Did the medical stuff, I guess you just took it in stride and you just assimilated whatever knowledge you needed to know?
Yeah, and I've learned so much since I've been at the agency. We do have a lot of physicians. We have MD PhDs. We have PhD research scientists who are, publishing. We have a whole division of epidemiology that's very linked to CDC. There's a lot of cross work going on. And we have 13 clinics, and I oversee the clinical quality management piece of that and report up to New York State to make sure we're following all the standards. I had to learn all of this really on the job, but I love it. So it was easy for me to, to dig in and learn a lot on the job.
Julie and Tara, do the two of you in your respective work environments deal with a lot of medical people or scientists who are, shall we say, people challenged? And if you do, how do you deal with that? No, Tara, do you want to take
Well,
that
I mean,
first?
I think in any work environment, you've got a spectrum, right, of some folks who are easy to, interface with and thrive in a team collaborative environment, and others who, don't so much and prefer to be, solo players. And I think it's sometimes hard when those that prefer to be the solo are forced into collaborative environments, because
Yeah.
that's the nature of work today. Most of it is collaborative. There's not many jobs that are not that way. And
Yes.
so really trying to get that to work together, I think is sometimes the challenge.
Yes.
Totally agree. And we do have some people who really believe that their way is the right way.
Yeah.
And especially if they have a lot of formal education and they're specialists in a field. But in the world of public health, as we've seen in the last few years, especially, it's not only about the science, it's about, the larger political context and what we can and can't do, and the actions that the health commissioner can take and recommend, or that a mayor or governor can undertake. It's
Yes.
not only about the science. And so
Yes.
we've had a lot of internal, issues about that, and having to kind of smooth things over or try to smooth things over. It doesn't always work.
For sure.
It's a continuing.
Could I ask both of you now, I mean, if you could impart 1 or 2 words of advice to, a current UW student who's maybe in their 3rd or 4th year, thinking about what might come next, whether or not they are thinking of moving to the States or not, what piece of advice would that be?
You go first, Tara.
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully, as people have seen, with the sort of meandering career paths and starting one place and then ending up somewhere else, keep your vision open, keep your aperture open, be willing to take a chance, even if you don't feel confident that you can do it. And there's a lot of unknowns. If you go into something thinking that you have to know everything, you're probably not going to try it. And so, really give it a try, even though you don't know everything. And I think especially for women and people of color and first gens, I think that can be particularly difficult. And so take the plunge, take the risk, do it. You don't have to know everything. You learn it as you go. Just work hard, interface with people, call for help. And doors will open up for you, and in ways that you never planned, never expected. I mean, I think if you go into it thinking that this is like I say, a straight line from here to there, it's like that isn't life. That is not the career, at least that I've seen and experienced. So yeah, take those chances, take a risk.
Very good. Julie?
I gave this some thought because Fred, you'd asked us to think about this question before this evening, and I had the same answer, Tara, the exact same answer. Keep your mind open, and don't think that you have to know everything before you start doing that thing. None of us are experts at anything really until we do it. And so I can't say that enough. I spent hours and hours researching which schools to go to, scholarships. I mean, I got a lot of no's. I got a great yes from the new school, but I also applied for a lot of things that I was rejected from. You just have to keep asking, and don't take no for an answer. Find out another way, and things will happen. Ask questions. Don't be shy. I do find that Canadians, and maybe even Winnipeggers a little more so, are sometimes a little reticent to just put themselves out there. And we're amazing on a world stage. We can compete with everyone coming out of Winnipeg.
Yeah. UW graduates can compete with anyone, I think. Yes. Yeah. They might be more inclined to apologize a lot when they're asking the questions. And when they bump into trees, they might apologize to the tree, but they're still quite special. So thank you very much. So Julie and Tara, you're both speaking to me as part of a series of conversations I'm having in the next few months with some other distinguished UW graduates who have migrated to the United States and who have set up their personal and professional lives in the States. The two of you have. So shall I assume that the two of you are now US as well as Canadian citizens, or are you permanent residents?
I'm a dual citizen, and I have a couple of kids who were born here. So I'm very happy to say they are also dual citizens, because when you're
Great.
born to a Canadian parent, you, at least one Canadian parent, you also can be Canadian. And yeah, and I know you didn't ask this part, but I just want to say, Canada is an amazing place. And actually, my older child is now going to university in Montreal at Concordia University. And I highly, highly encourage that from the time he was young, and
Wonderful.
having a blast there. And, he's thinking about maybe staying in Canada. And I think that's pretty amazing. So
That's your youngest?
that's the older one.
Oh, that's the older one. And the
Yeah.
younger one's still in high school, perhaps, or
Just about just going to start high school. I had
just
to
going to
go there in
start
March.
high school? Okay, you've got some time still
Yeah.
before. Okay, very good. Well, that's very exciting. Very exciting. Tara, what are you a dual citizen, or do you still have the green card, or?
I'm not a dual citizen, and I'm now coming up to my 30th year here, my 30th wedding anniversary. Yeah, it's on my list of things to figure out if I want to do that. There's certainly some practical benefits to doing it. It's been more of a time issue at this point to actually
Sure.
figure that out. Like Julie mentioned, 3 kids that are born here, so they are dual citizens as well. So, I feel guilty about the brain drain. So I'm not like going to advocate for this. I think if
Mm,
you have the opportunity to pursue your dreams in Canada, and there are plenty of ways to do that, you should do that. I think there's no reason to come to the United States. I wouldn't advocate for it. I mean, it happened to be my path. It just sort of happened upon me. It wasn't my dream to come live in the US, but Canada is an amazing place, and the people are amazing. The social system network I know it's got its flaws and its challenges,
yes,
but
yes.
it beats out, I think, the lack of a safety network here in the US. And then we could start talking about gun violence and things like that too, but I won't go
Oh my
there.
gosh. Yeah. I mean, and can I just preach
Hmm.
about this for a little more? Yeah, one of the issues I had to deal with at work today was there was a shooting outside our, not, thankfully, nobody from our staff was injured, but
Oh
outside our
dear.
location one of our locations in the Bronx. And,
Oh,
we had to go address that, and it was down the street from it, and a couple of people were killed. I mean, people here, this is a rough place. I mean,
yes.
I feel like I immigrated to New York City. That was my dream more than
Hmm.
I wanted to really live in the United States. It's pretty dog eat dog in this country. There are, as Tara said, there's no social safety net really.
Mm.
I think that people can if I were giving anyone advice, I would say you can probably have a really nice quality of life in Canada, more so than most places here.
Yes. Now, several other, thank you for that. In a previous discussion I had with several US-based U of W alums, people who work in pharma, this question of moving to the States and whether there were any circumstances under which they would consider moving back to Canada, they both pointed out that in their particular industries, there's just not enough money. There's not enough investment money, and there's not enough scale in the small companies. The size of the industry is tiny in Canada, so they could not imagine sort of attaining the level of professional success or maintaining it, moving back to Canada. Sadly, in their cases, what say the two of you? I mean, if someone asked you this question, if the right sort of opportunity arose, the right sort of professional opportunity for you arose, would you consider moving back to Canada?
I would, once my younger child's, finished high school.
Right, once you're an empty nester.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to remove him from his world that he knows here.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Sure.
definitely would.
What about you, Tara?
Always an open possibility. I think what gets harder is, with the family ties and Certainly, all my family it's still my family of origin is in Winnipeg, but my new family, meaning my three kids and husband, we're down here. So that makes it harder, like the roots start to pull you in, basically.
Oh, you must have very deep roots. And so a husband who's American, who spent some time at McGill, getting a medical degree, but is very, deeply rooted personally and professionally. So that would be a stretch. To ask your husband to move to Canada, I imagine.
And kids, it's when the kids are here, and my kids are most likely going to stay here. So yeah, that'll be the factor, probably.
Well, look, I don't want to take up much more of your time. You're both very busy people, and you want to start relaxing as part of your evening. I will, begin to wrap up. Do the two of you ever make it back to Winnipeg to visit extended family on a regular basis?
Yeah, I do. I was just there at the end of November. My parents are no longer living, but my brother's there. I have cousins there I've visited with, so definitely it's great. I love it.
And you, Tara?
Yeah, my parents, thankfully, they're still alive, and they're there, and aunts, uncles, brother, niece, cousins. Yeah.
I try to get back once a year as well. I have a brother, I have a niece and a nephew, and a bunch of cousins, and also some in-laws as well through my wife's family. I just wish I could fly direct. Don't you, Julie?
Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it? Maybe we can get on that, Fred.
It'll just never happen, I feel. Tara does not have that problem, obviously.
Not now. Yeah, when I was in Memphis, it was harder, definitely harder.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Three planes to get to
It was
Winnipeg.
two. It was mostly two, but yeah. And yeah, so but I focus on usually making my trips to Winnipeg in the summer now. That's my
Yeah.
And I brought to this conversation the mug my aunt sent me for Christmas. It's of her dock. Well, not her dock. It's a public dock at Lake Winnipeg. So
at Lake Winnipeg,
sharing that with everybody. That's a nice, beautiful picture of Lake Winnipeg.
Nice.
Near the family cottage, right?
Yeah, my aunt.
Well, I went to a summer sleepaway camp in Lake of the Woods near Kenora, Ontario. It was B'nai B'rith camp, and I still have very fond memories of that. I didn't have a summer cottage, but I had summer camp. So I'm just clicking on the Q&A button here, and I was prepared for a whole slew of questions, but instead I have kudos. Okay, Mahmoud Hussain, thank you so much. What fantastic webinar. Thank you, Fred and Tara and Julie and Judith. Wonderful. Also, I have a message for Tara from Dorothy Young, who's a member of another member of the U of W Alumni Council. Congratulations on being a Husky, Tara. I was the principal at SH after you graduated. Okay, what's this Husky business,
That's
Tara?
Silver Heights. So, Dorothy, I don't know if you can come off at all, but thanks for the shout out. And the piece of history that we share there is that the high school, I don't know if you guys know this, but our high school, Silver Heights Collegiate, was torn down, and it doesn't exist anymore. So now I've had a history of two high school. Actually, my elementary school has been torn down as well and doesn't exist anymore. But the Silver Heights High School it doesn't exist anymore. All the students were moved over to either St. James Collegiate or I think Sturgeon.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that.
Fantastic. Well, so what we have in the Q&A section is applause and expressions of appreciation rather than further questions. I think I'm going to wrap things up and bring everything to a close. Tara and Julie, thank you both for giving me so much of your time, and thanks for sharing your wisdom and your life experience with everyone who attended the webinar. If this were an in-person chat, I would invite you both out for a drink right now or for dinner. But alas, I can't. I just will, raise my mug of tea to you both.
All right.
So thanks to the two of you. Thanks again to Judith, who I think is still lurking online from her home. And thanks to Evan and the University of Winnipeg Media Services.